Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Learning 5e D&D. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. So, right off the bat, I want to get started by saying that I've had to change up today's schedule. Unfortunately, one of our players is having serious internet problems and is not able to join us. So I talked to the remaining people in the situation, player group, the only other guy playing with us, and we thought it might be better to simply just sit and talk about what it is we're doing and where we hope to go and some of the things that we'd like to see happen, and just kind of have a conversation about that. I mean, we could probably still technically play, but I know that our other player, Derek of Draco Blades Gaming, was pretty excited about being here, and unfortunately is stuck at his home, unable to get to a place where internet is available. So, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring in our remaining player, McCheeto, and just have a conversation, you know? McCheeto, you there, buddy?
I'm here.
Ah, like a wreck. Solid.
Like a wreck?
Not a wrecking ball, like a rock, you know?
Oh.
So, we were talking before the stream started kind of a lot about what this game has done and helped us do, and the excitement that comes with starting a new adventure and learning what it means to create a character, jump into a game, and explore this unwritten kind of unnavigated background to this person that you've created in this whole new scenario. And essentially how, you know, that this time around was different. And I think it's because we actually sat and, you know, made our characters for a change instead of simply just did the whole randomization. And so I gotta ask, do you feel like that made all the difference in the world when it comes to fleshing out what your character is, does, and how they act? Or what do you think?
Like just the difference between randomizing it and then actually going through and developing a character from scratch?
Yeah.
I think it does, because then you have a better idea of, like... Think of it like, that's a good way to put it. Well, think of it like how you're writing your book, kind of thing. You're putting in the effort and the time each and every day to, like, flesh out the book, essentially, and make it what it is. And then if you were to think of the character, if you just randomize it, like, I'm trying to think if there's an example in the real world, but I can't really think of something. It's like, I guess it's just like if you were to just buy something that's already made as it is, but you can't customize it. It's just how it is, and then that's what you have to work with, essentially. I guess for me in my brain, it creates less value than if it was something I customized and made. Like I went through the process of building it. Kind of like how I built my computer. That's a good example. Like rather than just going out and buying a pre-made version of it, I put in the time to actually build it from scratch, and so I have a deeper respect for it. And I think that's the same thing with this D&D Beyond, though it makes it easier, especially doing it through the system on D&D Beyond. I think you still get that same feel that if you were to just do it on like paper and do it just like how you would do it through the player's handbook, still that same quality, I feel like. That customizability.
Well, and I knew that going into this, I didn't want to overwhelm myself because of how overwhelming. Like, I remember the only reason why it was easier for me because that I simply had spent the time to go into it, and I think now that, having kind of made this switch reluctantly, of course, I feel like that made it easier. Because there wasn't as many rules, but I think that if I were to teach someone 3.5 now, like, I can see that being very overwhelming and confusing. And the only real reason why I did as well as I did was because I had spent the time to learn, but then having not done that same process with 5e or just doing that, I feel like kind of like I'm starting all over again, but a lot of the concepts are consistent. Now, I will say, used to we there was a concept called sundering, where you could attack someone's weapons. I found out the other day. I was talking to a good DM friend of mine. For instance, is no longer a thing in this. So they did strip down the rules, and they've opened up the gate for a lot more role play. And I kind of wonder, and I've never played first edition, so I had no idea how thick the rules got. But like, I'm not gonna lie, completely lost my train of thought. I got to
The
thinking.
ending of Back to the Future 3. That train is gone.
It'll be a spectacular wreck, Marty. Well, suffice to say, making the switch was astronomically easier this time around than relearning. Oh, well, sundering. Okay, so I think that's where I start. Like, is no longer a thing, and just first it did. Oh, so I'm reading. I'm on board. It didn't crash. It's still flying. Like the end of Well, they left the rules opened to a lot of degrees, and then like I feel like in second they tried to. Of course, this is just impressions. It's not fact, and there'll hopefully be someone out there to fact check me. Thank you very much, Mr. Internet. But then like, they try to put more rules into it to kind of help quantify things. Now things are, I feel like after 4 editions of it, they're just kind of like, okay, yeah, let's let's get out of the player's way so they can get into the deep role play. And so the fact that it is a bit more mainstream, a lot more mainstream, people are doing it just to kind of see what it's about and how fun it is, and you don't get made fun of like nerd. I'm like, well, no. Make all the difference in the world. So, speaking of roleplay, let's talk about last session. One of the important things that I had you guys do this time around was I had you guys give me kind of a rundown of your characters, and I had you talk about your past. And as you did, I took notes. And one of the things you told me is that your sister, your youngest sister, Yara, that's what I have written down here, loved building books. And so after that first session of just kind of getting you guys into the process of the game, I immediately knew that I wanted to take advantage of that, and pull some of that story into this. And I have to admit, as we move into more deep-seated content, where, like, by that I mean, you know, running a full-on module, like, some of these things from your past will crop up, and getting used to that. So my question now is to you, in pushing you to examine Farragos's history a bit more, as a player, was it challenging for you to kind of start thinking about what it all means to hear news and come up with on the spot when I start throwing curveballs? Because Berkstaff said to you, he's like, oh, it's a terrible thing that your sister went missing. And you didn't explicitly say that, but at the same time, it's just part of the improv process. Maybe a little bit more about that. Like, how was that for you? Because then you found her chisel, you know, inside the vase. And, like, I know that that was something that you probably weren't expecting, but there it was. So, let's explore that a little bit.
I thought it was actually a lot of fun, because then I was just like, how do I play with this? Because, I mean, thankfully, it wasn't, well, I don't want to say it was not difficult, but it was,
Well, I know that you didn't give me a huge, long backstory, right? And so I would just, I mean, if you're playing a module, I would have liked that, just so that I can pull different things from it and kind of go over that with you. Because I know it's kind of more like sprung up last minute almost. And I was like, okay, I can see how that would make things a bit more like, oh, how do I think on the spot of, you know, how this is going to work, right? It's going to be one of those things where it's like, okay, so he sprung this on me. How do I take that and say yes and as they do in the 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 improv world?
as the good book says. No, I get you. It was, I enjoyed the process. I'm not sure if Derek felt the same way about it, but I know for myself it was, I enjoyed it. I love the chance that to roleplay the chisel whenever I saw that. Whenever you mentioned her being gone, I just took it as though if I had heard it for the first time, like, I could still roleplay that with the character, because he would still be kind of in surprise of it, because even, I mean, it's been 5 years at least in the context of the her being gone, that it was I know for a fact he wouldn't get over that fact.
You know,
because he is, I mean, elves live long lives too, so I mean, maybe it's a bit of a different process for them.
You know, and I was thinking about that, and I was just like, you know, I suspect that even for an elf, the fact that, you know, one of your one of your family members disappearing, it always seems kind of fresh. And I guess in the aspect of an elf, that's kind of one of those things to where, you know, you're one of the 5 years doesn't seem like very long to you in the grand scheme of things, but at the same time, when you're looking for somebody and someone's disappeared, I always feel like it's going to be fresh. You know, when I was married, it always felt like I remember, you know, walking down the hall of my home and just, man, just being so surprised by that, you know, just kind of excited. But, well, speaking of Derek, there was one point in last session where he's like, well, my character wouldn't do that. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, okay, if we're considering what someone will or wouldn't do, and we're talking about improv, I was thinking to myself, man, maybe we should have a conversation of trust. Because in all honesty, whenever we never really know how we're gonna react to certain things until it happens. So it's not to say that some people don't, that it's very possible that you could overreact, be like, man, I didn't think I would act that way, but here I am. Maybe I need to kind of think about this and do something about it, which is very viable, right? But then, like, that's kind of the whole point behind this, is to build that trust. So if I say your character does, reacts slightly off kilter, that could happen to just about anybody, you know, especially in a young kid's life. I believe he's not, but 23 or 24. So, got a lot of the youth left to him, but, and I think that as we get deeper into the game, the deeper we're going to be able to, hopefully have that trust, that player DM trust, that, because some people, I haven't played in a lot of games in a long time, but there's nothing worse than sitting around a table with a whole bunch of folk, and then, not trusting their level of commitment, their level of immersion, and until you've played with them for a while. So that's kind of been the whole point behind the Learning 5e D&D series, is to kind of not just learn about the game, but learn about us as players.
Right. I'm actually curious. Do you remember what happened in that situation with Derek?
I think it was a response to finding the cloth.
Okay.
The marriage cloth of his,
Oh,
his
in the attic.
Yeah, I believe it was something up in that area, or something to do with the older guys, the two old men.
Do you remember what was the response you came up with it?
I don't off the top of my head. I think that it wasn't entirely outside of the realm of possibility, but for him it just seemed like it was an impossibility. But then I realized that as we get started into this is, yeah, like I said, one of those things to where it's like, trust me, this will be fine. Take it and then move on with it. Even if he's not the kind of guy that would normally get upset and throw a table, well, he did last game. But like, if all of a sudden he does, that always brings up the question, how am I going to handle this reaction that I had, right? I just got really deep real quick.
I'll use what happened kind of yesterday. You know how that we had that whole kind of communication crack, right?
Oh, yeah.
I guess in one way this could be... Now obviously I know there's probably tons of things in that Derek hopefully at some point will learn if he sticks with the group. But taking the opportunity to grow from the situation and because I was trying to think if the reaction was extreme in his mind that you had placed on the character, if I can say it that way, then I don't see how, or I don't see why he couldn't have just gone with it and maybe like tries to cover it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's say it was an outburst, and in his mind he's like, okay, my character might not have done that, but let's say that you say that he does, and then maybe he's just like, oh, I don't know. You get my point, I think. Just like down, like maybe tries to cover it up, and he's just like, yeah, I didn't mean to do that.
You know, it's really hard saying, especially being as being in the field in which he has, to completely and totally, you know, react in a way, especially a young man such as him. Like they make impulsive decisions that aren't necessarily always the most rational or logical thing to do, especially in his line of work. Because if I'm not mistaken, he's a gladiator, and like flying off the handle with violence may not be something that he is commonly does, but you never quite know, like, what you may do in a situation until you find yourself faced with it. I mean, that in and of itself is human nature, and probably the crux of a lot of dramatic situations, right? By the way, those who are watching, if you have any questions or want to chat, go ahead and throw them into the one of the chats right there. I put up the little thing that says if you have questions, ask them now. But and I think that kind of dynamic makes it that much more realistic, you know, because not everyone has the answer to how to handle a situation with any given set of circumstances, you know, and so you just kind of react and learn, and you go with what your basic instincts kind of tell you at that particular instance, and you're kind of like, whoa, definitely a learning experience, that's for certain. Well, I do know this. Learning all this, well, I think that going beyond just learning the game, but also learning each other has been one of the most important things that I don't think gets talked about. I hear a lot of these horror stories in like online, like D&D stories, and sometimes it's just like some of these things are just absolute legend, like just the things they've accomplished. But when you think about the other part of it, the horror stories, that just becomes terrible. Like, how could someone act this way?
Right.
And I actively wanted to avoid that whenever I created this. Of course, it's also kind of hard to find consistent players too. Not gonna lie on that one. That one got to be kind of hard.
Yeah, that's true.
Plus, with COVID and stuff like that, you know, that becomes kind of a bit of a problem.
Technology, bro.
Well, yeah. I mean, I do kind of like having, you know, the fantasy grounds, like, just ready to rock and roll with, like, maps and stuff like that. There is a bit of a learning curve, and I can admit that it's not the most user friendly at times. It's like I get lost kind of easy in this, and I'm used to navigating technology, but which is why, like, I get really into the user experience. But
I was also gonna say real quick.
Your mouth full.
Yes, I have my leftover omelet. Okay.
How dare you?
It was well, I was just gonna say, which you already have done before, but maybe that's a situation with Derek is a reminder to maybe just check in and be like, hey, so how would your character react or respond in this situation?
Well,
Which I think you have done, which I'm not saying you don't do it, but it's just a friendly reminder, I guess.
you know, that being said, I'm wondering if between these modules, these one shots, if we should start taking the time to sit down and think about that and just have the conversation and not just jam on to the next situation. I wonder if we should just kind of have these let's talks um, um, between them, and things that you would have liked to have seen, things that I would have liked to have seen, hopes and desires, and kind of having it being a group learning and reflecting, time of reflection.
I mean, I'm down for that.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm gonna write that down in my book. Um,
Like, I mean, if Derek's serious about like Critical Role stuff, then I think we each have to learn to spend time with the character and develop it.
right. Well, that being said, I will say that eventually, what I'm thinking about having done do. Well, before we get to that, there's something else I wanted to kind of bring up. As long as we're talking about, um,
D&D?
yeah. Um, so in this last game, I think that Derek rolled a record number of like 5 1s.
Yeah,
No,
that was kind of impressive.
I have to admit that got to be kind of really impressive. Now, as the status quo is back in the day, 3.5 days, if you rolled a 20, you would have to roll another d20 to confirm whether it was critical damage, which was kind of stupid to me unless it was a natural 20. I think that one automatically went through. Well, suffice it to say, like, then I started learning about a practice of doing that with the ones. If you rolled a 1, well, to see how bad it is. And I think I've told this story about a guy I used to play with. I'd heard about who had rolled a 1 and then a natural 20, and his swords of disintegration on a critical hit, he disintegrated himself. And he was mad. He was rolling up his, things like, freaking swords disintegrate my ass, And I was like, wow, right? And this, I kind of wish he was on. I always like sitting down and having those conversations with him. But, he was telling me, it's like, well, 20 just means that you hit. And, like, you don't have to confirm it. So, like, I told him about, like, well, roll a d20 and see how bad it is, right? He's like, well, if that's the case, then you need to give them spectacular successes and not just spectacular fails as well. And so that kind of shifted my thinking. It's like, well, if they roll a 1 and you have them roll a 20 just for the sake of it, have them have something superficial happen to them. Like he said, well, he gave an example. He said, well, you go to attack the frost giant, you roll a 1. Okay, well, in this instance, using these parameters, he said, like, okay, well, roll a d20 and see how bad it is. Well, he rolls a 20. And he's like, at that point, make it something superficial. So he said, the frost giant is so struck about how horrible you are as a fighter. He begins laughing so hard that he ends up puking on you. And for the rest of the encounter, everyone's just like, oh gosh, you stink so bad, and I'm like, just kind of one of those situations, as opposed to, oh, you rolled a 1 and then a 20, having that come around and hit the character for damage, make it be superficial, right? And I'm like, I was like, oh, okay. Like in this last one, if he rolled a 1 and then rolled a 20, like have the creature like bite off his boot, and so now he's kind of like Ilithar, where he he's got like 1 boot now or something of that nature. It doesn't really affect his armor class to a huge extent per se, but it'd just be something that's like, really, it's kind of embarrassing. And I thought, well,
critical embarrassment.
Yeah, pretty much. Because, and I guess to the same extent, I can extend that to getting a 20. But then, I normally don't roll, because a 20 is an automatic hit and 1's automatic miss. Maybe I should do that. Maybe how spectacular a flare roll, I guess you could almost call it,
And that's only with like hits and like hit attack dice, right?
Right. So that was really interesting to me, like, because he said when he was rolling like a high check or something, but his character was so skilled at it, he normally took a natural 10 to every roll that he did. Well, the DM calls for a stealth check, and he rolls like a 1. He's like, up, 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 and someone's like, oh, look at you rolled a 1, you fail. It's like, yeah, I got 11 on the check. What's your perception? A 9? Yeah, you don't see me. And they're like, oh, that's what made things change. And I think that's cool, because like there's so many instant death things. Like you can have the big bad boss roll a 1, instant failure on a save, and like the death spell, he dies. And that's, I think, why they came up with legendary resistances, so that he could use that 2 or 3 times a day to just make it happen, to keep that from happening.
Right.
And that kind of adds a whole new element. Like this game, I think there are more opportunities to do more damage if played right, but unlike before, they're not beefing up the numbers to make that happen, and there's still a very real chance of dying every time you go into a situation. And that became kind of profound to me, that became one of those things to where it was like, okay, just because this happens doesn't mean my character just can't die, but it still can happen. It's just, the likelihood based upon any given number of factors. So I feel like that's a bit more of an exciting gameplay. It keeps people from getting like too cocky about situations.
Yeah, I like the idea of like the critical
embarrassment.
Yeah. That way it doesn't feel like you're always like doing something really stupid, like kind of like how he slashed me. Took like what, 8 hit points off or something?
It was like 5, yeah. But the thing is like, I probably would have done that in the last thing we did, because the whole entire module is like, you need to drain your characters. You need to drain them. You need to drain them as best you can, because that was the whole point at the end. It was part of the story, right? In this one, that's not so much what they're saying.
Yeah, I was still pretty drained at the end of that.
The thing asks for like 6 level players or whatever.
For this one?
It asks for at least 4 to 6 players. And so like that's why I made you guys get a little bit higher. Once again, I'm really excited. I'm glad that DM's Guild, like, they helped a lot with this, making this happen, just learning. And I do look forward to seeing what other else Um, they have.
It'd be interesting to play in your silver tier.
Yeah, that's not something I'm saying that's not gonna happen. Um, but that is one of those things to where it's it's gonna take a while. It's gonna take a while, my dude. Um, and
Gonna make my outlaw a rogue.
your Rouge, yeah, it's a possibility. You don't play Outlaw Rogue. You play Subtlety.
I know, but in this world, gonna give me some guns and some swords.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Be a seaport rogue pirate.
Which will do actually really well in this area.
I think that's what I'm gonna play with next, if we get a chance to do silver tier.
Well, and that's the thing. I think that what we're gonna do, is I think that we're going to, as we move into this. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Well, first of all, thank you all to Dungeon Masters Guild, DMsGuild.com for helping out with this. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Now I'm all of a sudden starting to see stuff. I'm like, okay, adventurers need more than just brute force, magical powers, and nimble moves in order to survive the dangers that await them. A sharp mind is just as important as a sharp sword. When faced with puzzles, instructions on how to scale the difficulty, heck yeah, that could be a thing. Well, and I think I like stuff like this because all of a sudden, like, this becomes a situation to where we can learn to grow as not just, players, but as storytellers as well.
That's why I did a mage this time, or not mage, well, a wizard, but because I was like, I've never done a wizard, and it's always seemed complicated.
It is. It's just you have a lot more stuff to know as far as the spells, and that's okay.
Well, that's the other thing too that makes it kind of nice is that they added that what's it called? Spell. What's that thing called? The little affinity thing? No, the. Why is it not listed here? Oh, Arcane Focus. Arcane Focus allows spells to not have to expend like any components unless it's like a gold cost.
Right.
Like if it's something like jade, a jaded stone that's worth 500 gold, you have to have at least 500 gold present to be able to. Which I guess it depends on the DM because I think like with Matt Mercer, they actually, some DMs will either say if you have the gold you can expend it as the cost for the spell, or vice versa, you have to actually go and role play an adventure to get the actual resource, like things like dusted jade, like crushed jade on some spell, or like the pearl that they needed whenever it was like in episode 8, I think.
Spoilers.
Yeah, one of them had a ring and he asked if it was equivalent to the price of the pearl that was needed, and yeah, it was like a more expensive pearl. So stuff like that versus like where it says like Dancing Lights, it says here it requires like phosphorus, witchwood, or glowworm. Like you could have either one of those if you had like a component pouch, but because of the Arcane Focus, it makes it easier to not have to worry about having those components unless it says like something with a, yeah, like I said, gold. Like it says, a illusory script requires like a lead-based ink worth at least 10 gold. So you would, in that case, need the gold pieces for that specific ink. And I thought that was interesting. So Arcane Focus did have some kind of use, because when I saw that, I was like, what does it do for the spell? Like, I kept looking it up, and I'm like, does this just do nothing? Is it just roleplay, or does it actually have... So it actually removes the component need when you do a spell in the game. As long as it's not, you know, priced, as long as it doesn't specify a gold amount. Which I thought, okay, that makes sense. I thought that was really cool. Plus, I didn't know Magic Missile didn't need a hit die. So that was really cool as well.
No, it just automatically hits. Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Well, one of the last things I want to get to before we close this thing, as we finish up, what I will say that I want to kind of do is I want to tackle a module, like a full-on campaign. And I thought about it, and I decided that I want to go back to where a lot of this started for me, and that started in Icewind Dale. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with this place, but this is where Drizzt Do'Urden of Forgotten Realms had this all had taken place. And so it'd be nice to have other players in this, but I think it's just going to be hopefully you two. As far as that's concerned.
Does it recommend, like,
well,
an amount?
I don't know.
No,
well,
you have it pulled up, I think.
Yeah, I'm actually going to listen to the video. It's a 12-minute video. Holy cow.
Hello, friends and D&D family. Welcome to D&D.
Oh, wow, Micah Burton.
Roll with Advantage. I'm so excited to be here with you.
It's actually kind of cool that it says Fantasy Grounds on that.
Yeah, I'm so stoked.
Well, yeah, it has it
So,
listed.
You're a big Star Trek fan. This is actually Jordan. I can't think of his name, but this is his daughter.
Who?
Oh, if you're watching the stream, you can see where it's on here as well.
Oh, the chick on the right?
Yeah. LeVar Burton.
Oh, yeah. I could kind of see it.
Hi, oh my
Hold on,
god,
let me look
so
her
am
up.
I. We love D&D, and this is just a weekend full of D&D, so I don't know what could be
Jordy
better, honestly.
LaForge.
Yeah, and you know, if you're not familiar with D&D Live, let us tell you a little bit about why we're here and what we're doing. D&D Live 2020 Roll with Advantage is a celebration of diverse storytellers, creators, and players
Man,
coming
he got
together
old.
to conquer any challenge that their dungeon masters can throw at
Not
them.
that old.
And
I mean,
this
he
year,
still
D&D
looks
Live is
good.
teaming up with Red Nose Day charity organization and
see.
combining the strength of our communities to conquer the challenge of ending child poverty.
D&D fans and supporters of Red Nose Day hold the belief that the strongest parties are the most diverse, and that the best way to combat the issues facing the world is head-on and together.
And to that end, Wizards of the Coast will be matching any donations made
Oh.
this weekend to up to $125,000.
Wow.
So if you want to make good on that promise from them, go to dndlive2020.com
That
and
kinda makes
donate
sense
to that
now.
worthy cause.
And off of that, we have so much programming to get to this weekend, so we should probably take a look at the schedule, right?
Yes.
Definitely
we have
a
so
geek,
many
I can
things.
tell.
Yeah. You probably already saw some of that Baldur's Gate 3 gameplay, but we are here right now at that noon mark, a little bit after, because we are going to show you a reveal of the new D&D adventure. So stoked.
It is going to be so much fun. We have guests here to talk about the new program, the new game that's coming out, and I mean, I can't wait to get to it. How about you, Anna?
Oh, I'm stoked. Yeah, there's going to be lots of gameplay. There's going to be so many opportunities to learn about D&D, and this is one of the first ones. We have
Oh
an
my
owl bear
gosh,
here
who's
named
got the
Chris Perkins,
owl?
who's going to tell us a few things about the
Chris
game, as well as
Perkins.
Jeremy Crawford. Chris being the principal narrative designer for D&D, and Jeremy
Chris
being the principal
Perkins.
rules designer. Welcome, guys.
Thank
know.
you.
Now, guys, we are so excited to reveal
Wow.
the new story. Mika, do you want to do the honors?
Yes. So this is the first time anybody's going to hear the title. So I hope everybody's ready out there. It is going to be called Icewind Dale, the Rime of the Frostmaiden. There it is. There's the cover. Wow, that's cool.
Oh, that's the first time I've seen that. It's so beautiful. What are we looking at on the cover there, guys?
So you're seeing.
So
one
did
cover
you
by
play
Tyler
this before?
Jacobson, which has.
No, I played. Well, let's see. It was. Oh, wait. Icewind Dale, my first foray into D&D was through this one.
Hrothgar mentioned there were strangers in town. Watch your back. Well met, friend, and welcome to my home.
Kind of makes me think of WoW.
It's like more like Diablo.
Well, yeah, it has the aspects of Diablo, but like whenever they originally, it was like a strategy-based. Before it was actually the whole World of Warcraft. It was just Warcraft.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Because they had a version where they were going through the Sylvanas slash what's his name, Frostmourne storyline thing.
So that was my first, and then I realized that, quickly it turned into a matter of like, Icewind Dale was the place where, like I talked about, Drizzt, and there's not exactly a lot of. Oh wow, this is okay. I'm actually looking for the place. Forgotten Realms. Thank you. Yeah, Icewind Dale, the spine of the world, is what they call it, and so, this is
I'd love
where
to do it.
this is where like the first things got started with Drizzt, and yeah, when we first see it come into play. And I'd always thought about like the winters and stuff like that. It would just kind of describe in that. So that's kind of where we're going back to, I guess, in this adventure. So it's going to be really cold. It's going to be cool going into winter this way as well.
Some poor chap.
Looks like a great place for Fargeros Hoarfrost.
Oh my gosh.
The grasp of the Frostmaiden.
It's in the
And
name.
then the other Halo by Hydro 74 gives a full frontal illustration of the Frostmaiden's owly visage.
That is the Frostmaiden herself, huh?
Yep, in all her glory.
It's an interesting look for a Frost
Tell
Maiden.
us a little bit. Let's get into what this adventure is going to be like. What are the main themes?
It's a big
Chris?
owl.
Yeah.
Well, this is a horror adventure set in Icewind Dale, a region far to the north of the Forgotten Realms, locked behind the spine of the world mountains. Themes of the story are isolation, paranoia, and secrecy.
Now we have a lot of familiar things that we know we can expect in D&D, but we're always looking for the new things. What's going to be fresh and new in this adventure? What are the things that the players can look forward to?
Well, players can look forward to a campaign that embraces the setting and the environment. It's going to be chilly, it's going to be cold, it's a dangerous place, Icewind Dale. The people who go there they have to be very, very brave to survive the perils there. Now, the adventure is structured in such a way that a dungeon master can either run it all the way through or break it up into its smaller pieces, very similar to how the Essentials kit was structured. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I think that in keeping with a horror setting, there are certain tropes that will come up again and again in this adventure that will have the players on the edge of their seats, and DMs will be able to scare them in a whole new way.
Thanks, Chris. That's just what we all want, more trauma as players. leave it to Chris Perkins for the feature of the new book to be horrible experiences. But no, I'm super excited for that.
Yeah.
And I think that as we saw on the character, or on the cover, one of those horrors is going to be Auriel, the demigod, the new goddess, or not new, but who is the main antagonist of this module. Can you go into a little more detail about her?
Yeah, so in D, there's gods who are greater gods who don't really manifest physically. You can't interrupt them. They're far away, distant figures of great power. But then there are entities that we classify as lesser gods who are, they assume physical forms, and you can shake their hand, or you can, clash swords with them. They're very, very powerful entities, but they can be fought and they can be encountered in an adventure. And Auriel falls into the latter category. And in sort of concepting her,
sounds like Hercules.
We, or I rather, sort of
Sounds
think of her as a very Hela-like figure. Anybody who's seen the movie Thor Ragnarok knows who Hela is. Super, super powerful, but fallible, flawed, and somebody that you can actually confront in the flesh.
And I think you mentioned that we may not always see her looking exactly as we see her in that art, right?
Yeah, Jeremy, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, one of the important parts of the story of deities in Dungeons and Dragons is that they can actually assume many forms. And sometimes in our adventures when we have featured gods, you might see just one stat block for an avatar of that deity. Well, in this book, we actually have multiple stat blocks for the Frost Maiden, depending upon the form that she takes, depending upon when you face her. And speaking of stat blocks, I do want to mention that this book has over 50 of them. I think the largest number of stat blocks that we have included in any of our 5th edition adventures.
That's so exciting. I love the idea of not knowing how we're going to encounter the Frost Maiden. And you probably won't tell us what those forms are yet, will you?
No, you can see one of them. You can see one of them today, and the rest will be a secret.
Well,
And
guys,
it seems like this new... Oh.
No, go ahead, Nika.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it seems like this new module is not just giving us so many new stat blocks and so many new monsters, but new ways to play as well. Can you give us a little more detail about what players and DMs can expect when they crack open this book and what they're going to be sitting down to the table to play?
Yeah, so
I think...
Skyrim chicken.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, I insist.
As Chris mentioned earlier, this adventure really delves into the quest structure that we explored in the Essentials kit. And what we mean by that is it certainly has a large epic story, But that story is divided up into quests that you can embark upon all on their own. So let's say you want to have a standalone adventure in Icewind Dale. You could, as DM, pick one of the quests in this book and run just it, and have a complete D&D story by running that little mini adventure. But you can also take all of those quests, play through them, and through the play experience, have this epic horror story emerge. A story where the villain isn't just the Frostmaiden and many other villainous NPCs who make appearances in the adventure, but the villain is also the environment itself. You see on the cover of the book that, yes, the Frostmaiden is prominent, but so is the weather. And because of that, in this adventure, we have forefronted in the play experience and the rules that you're going to have to go up against things like blizzards, avalanches. You're going to have to figure out how to survive with your food if you get trapped out in this frozen waste. So we even have rules on how to fish up knucklehead trout, just to see, can we get something to eat while we are out in this frosty wasteland.
And I imagine that brings a whole bunch of new tools and strategies for a DM, right? New abilities for them to look at an environment.
Yes, absolutely. The DM can take these tools not only to dig into the experience of adventuring in Icewind Dale, but also take those and apply them in other adventures. So we've designed things like the avalanche rules, the blizzard rules, so that they can be used elsewhere. This adventure also includes a number of sports and games for the characters to play within the adventure itself. And many of those experiences could also be ported to other adventures. For example, there is a Goliath sport that the adventurers can participate in as they are making their trek through Icewind Dale.
Rock throwing, I think it was? I don't remember.
Goliath sport?
I'm so excited.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, I know that I'm completely stoked for whichever DM is going to ruin
Snowball
my life
fight
in the Icewind Dale and freeze me to death and make me cry. But when can we expect to play this game?
So, Rime of the Frostmaiden comes out later this summer, and it's 320 pages of adventure with a poster map in it. So there's enough content to make a whole nice long campaign out of it. But as Jeremy said, also it's designed to be sliced up. I think that when we were writing the adventure and we were coming up with the themes of the adventure, isolation being the most important, we didn't know 2 years ago that isolation would be such a theme in our real life. That would all be basically, we'd all be locked away in our private dungeons, waiting to emerge. I have a new sympathy for the people of Icewind Dale and the heroes who have to explore it. Having been locked in this basement that I'm in for months on end.
Well, I can't wait to get into it. Thank you so much for making the time from your isolated caves, wherever you are, Chris and Jeremy, to talk to us about this product. The release date is September 15th, 2020, so be sure to look forward to that day. You can pick up Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden then. And guys, don't go anywhere because we have lots more coming your way.
No! Yeah, I'm going somewhere because the video's ending, so no. I will say that this seems like a lot of fun. This
that would
is
be interesting.
I'm not sure if this is one of those things to where I'm probably would be buying the physical book to it. But then like I don't know, cuz I don't want to just have it on a digital version.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely something to have to read and go into. As far as
it kind of sucks that there's no way to like quantify the link between your account and the book. But I get why it's not a thing, because then you would have people buying the book and then reselling it.
Possibly. But so far, the 5th edition book has kept itself rather well as far as value goes. So, you might want to invest in one yourself. I like how mine still has that new book smell. I like it. I like it. Well, I think that's going to wrap up what we're doing for this particular session of learning 5e D&D. You know, I'm hoping that things work out, that we get to play next week as far as that goes. But oh wow, there it goes. Well, I'm not going to stream Overwatch, but that's okay. Well, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring this episode of Learning 5e D&D Let's Talk, I guess episode 1 for that one, to a close. And I hope that this has been educational to some degree or another to you. If so, let me know down in those comments below, or send me an email. Couldn't hurt. I want to thank the player Chris McGoldrick for joining us, and I hope that Machado, that the rest of the group and crew can, or well, just Derek, I guess, join us next time as we learn how to play 5e D&D. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
you.